Here's a question for you. What's the real difference between using Dataflows Gen2 and a direct pipeline copy in Microsoft Fabric? And does it actually matter which you choose? If you care about scalable, error-resistant data ingest that your business can actually trust, this isn't just a tech debate. I'll break down each step, show you why the wrong decision leads to headaches, and how the right one can save hours later. Let's get into the details. Why Dataflows Gen2 versus pipelines actually changes everything. Choosing between Dataflows Gen2 and pipelines inside Microsoft Fabric feels simple until something quietly goes sideways at 2 in the morning. Most teams treat them as tools on the same shelf, like picking between Pepsi and Coke. The reality, it's more like swapping a wrench for a screwdriver and then blaming the screw when it won't turn. Ingesting data at scale is more than lining up movement from point A to point B. It's about trust, long-term sanity, and not getting that urgent Teams call when numbers don't add up on a Monday morning dashboard. Let's look at what actually happens in the trenches. A finance group needed to copy sales data from their legacy SQL servers straight into the lakehouse. The lead developer spun up a pipeline, drag and drop, connect to source, right to the lake. On paper, it worked. Numbers landed on time. 3 weeks later, a critical report started showing odd gaps. The issue? Pipeline's copy activity pushed through malformed rows without a peep, duplicates, missing columns, silent truncations, errors that Dataflows Gen2 would have flagged, cleaned, or even auto-healed before any numbers reached reporting. The right tool could have substituted chaos with quiet reliability. We act like Meta and Apple know exactly what future features are coming, but in enterprise data, the best you get is a roadmap covered in sticky notes. Those direct pipeline copies make sense when you're moving clean, well-known data. But as soon as the source sneezes, a schema tweak here, a null popping up there, trouble shows up. Using a Dataflow Gen2 here is like bringing a filter to an oil change. You're not just pouring the new oil, you're making sure there's nothing weird in it before you start the engine. This isn't just a hunch, it's backed up by maintenance reports across real-world deployments. One Gartner case study found that teams who skipped initial cleansing with Dataflows Gen2 saw their ongoing pipeline maintenance hours jump by over 40% after just 6 months. They had to double back when dashboards broke, fixing things that could have been handled automatically upstream. Nobody budgets for fixed data that got through last month, but you feel those hours. There's also a false sense of security with pipelines handling everything out of the box. Need to automate ingestion and move 10 tables on a schedule? Pipelines are brilliant for orchestrating, logging, and robust error handling, especially if you're juggling tasks that need to run in order or something fails and needs a retry. That's their superpower. But expecting them to cleanse or shape your messy data on the way in is like expecting your mailbox to sort your bills by due date. It delivers, but the sorting is on you. Dataflows Gen2 is built for transformation and reuse. Set up a robust cleansing step once, and your upcoming ingestion gets automatic, consistent hygiene. You can create mapping, join tables, and remove duplicate records up front. Even better, you gain a library of reusable logic. So when something in the data changes, you update in one spot instead of everywhere. Remember our finance team and their pipeline with silent data errors. If they had built their core logic in Dataflows, they'd have updated the cleansing once. No more hunting for lost rows across every copy. And this bit trips everyone up, schema drift. Companies often act like their database shapes will stay frozen, but as business moves, columns get added or types get tweaked. Pipelines alone just shovel the new shape downstream. If a finance field name changes from customer num to customer ID, a direct copy often misses the mismatch until something breaks. The Dataflows Gen2, with its data profiling and transformation steps, spots those misfits as soon as they appear. It gives you a chance to fix or flag before the bad data contaminates everything. Now, imagine you're dealing with a huge SQL table, 50 million rows plus, with nightly refresh. If the ingestion plan isn't thought out, pipelines can chew up resources, blow through integration, runtime limits, and leave your ops team sorting out throttling alerts. Without smart upfront cleansing and reusable transformation, even small data quirks can gum up the works. A badly timed schema tweak becomes a multi-day cleanup mission that pulls your best analysts off more valuable work. So here's what matters. The decision on when to use Dataflows Gen2 versus pipelines isn't about personal workflow preferences or which UI you like best. It's about building a foundation that can scale and adapt. Dataflows Gen2 pays off when you need to curate, shape, and cleanse data before it hits your lake, locking in trust and repeatability. Pipelines shine when you need to automate, schedule, orchestrate, and handle complex routing or error scenarios. Skip Dataflows Gen2 and your maintenance costs jump. Minor schema changes become ugly outages, and your business starts to lose trust in the numbers you deliver. Let's see what it takes to actually connect to SQL for ingestion, right down to the nuts and bolts of locking security down before moving a single row. Securing and scaling SQL ingestion, no more nightmares. Connecting Microsoft Fabric to SQL should be routine, but you'd be surprised how quickly things get messy. One tiny shortcut with permissions or overestimating what your environment can handle, and you start seeing either empty dashboards or, even worse, security warning emails stacking up. Balancing speed, scale, and security when you're pulling from an enterprise SQL source is a lot like juggling while someone keeps tossing extra balls at you. Miss one, and the consequences roll downhill. Take, for example, a company running daily sales analytics. Their IT team wanted faster numbers for the business, so they boosted the frequency of their data pulls from SQL. Simple enough, at least until the pipeline started pegging the SQL server with requests every few minutes. The next thing they knew, email alerts from compliance, excessive read activity, heavy resource consumption, and throttling warnings from the database admin. What was meant to be a harmless speed boost flagged them for possible security issues and impacted actual business transactions. Instead of just serving the analytics team, now they had operations leadership asking tough questions about whether their data platform was secure or just reckless. This is where designing your connection strategy up front actually pays off. Microsoft Fabric gives you a few options, and skipping the basics will catch up with you. Always use managed identities when you can, and never give your ingestion service broad access just to get it working. Managed identities let Fabric connect to your SQL data sources without storing passwords anywhere in plain text. That's less risk, fewer secrets flying around, and it's aligned with least privilege access policies. So the connector touches only what it should, nothing extra. If you're new to this, you'll find yourself working closely with Azure Active Directory, making sure permissions are scoped to the tables or views you need for your pipeline. It's not glamorous, but it's the groundwork that keeps your sleeping hours undisturbed. Performance is where most teams hit their first wall, especially with the kind of large SQL data sets you find in the enterprise. There's a persistent idea that just letting the connector pull everything nightly is fine. In reality, that's how you wind up with pipelines that run for hours or fail halfway through, clogging up the rest of your schedule. Research from Microsoft's own Fabric adoption teams has shown that for most customers with tables in the tens of millions of rows, using batching and partitioning techniques can reduce ingestion times by 60% or more. Instead of one monolithic operation, you break up your data loads so that no single process gets overwhelmed, and you sidestep SQL throttling policies designed to stop accidental denial of service attacks from rogue analytics jobs. A related topic is incremental loading. Rather than loading an entire massive table every time, set up your process to grab only the new or changed data. This one change alone can mean the difference between a daily job that takes minutes versus hours. But you have to build in logic to track what's actually new, whether that's a dedicated timestamp field, a version column, or even a comparison of row hashes for the truly careful. The next bottleneck often comes down to the connector you pick. Fabric gives you native SQL connectors, but it also supports ODBC and custom API integrations. Choosing which one to use isn't just about performance, it's about data sensitivity and platform compatibility too. Native connectors are usually fastest and most reliable with Microsoft data sources. They're tested, supported, and handle most edge cases smoothly. ODBC, while more flexible, adds overhead and complexity, especially for advanced authentication or if you have unusual SQL flavors in the mix. Custom APIs can plug gaps where native connectors don't exist, but they put all the error handling and schema validation work on you. For truly sensitive data, stick with the native or ODBC options unless you have absolute control over the API and deep monitoring in place. Let's talk about what happens when you get schema drift. You set up your pipeline, it works, and then the data owner adds a new column or changes a data type. Pipelines can move data faithfully, but they aren't proactive about these changes by default. More than one analytics team has spent days piecing together why a dashboard stopped matching after a surprise schema update. It turns out the pipeline had dropped records or mapped columns incorrectly, and nobody realized until the reporting went sideways. Dataflows Gen2 becomes a safety net here. Before the data lands in your lake or warehouse, Gen2's data profiling can spot new columns, change types, or rogue nulls. It gives you a preview and lets you decide how to handle misfits right at the edge instead of waiting for a full ingest to land and hoping everything lines up. That means less troubleshooting, faster recovery, and most importantly, more confidence when business users ask you what's really behind that new number on their dashboard. If you build your SQL ingestion with these steps in mind, locking down security, loading efficiently, picking the right connectors, and handling schema drift before it bites, you set yourself up for trouble-free loads and fewer compliance headaches. That's a playbook you can reuse whether you're onboarding a new app or scaling out for end-of-quarter rushes. Of course, not all enterprise data sources behave like SQL. Some are more flexible, but that flexibility comes at a price, like Azure Data Lake, where file formats shift and authentication can feel like a moving target. Azure Data Lake and Schema Drift, taming the unpredictable. Azure Data Lake lures in a lot of data teams with the promise of boundless storage and easy scaling, but the first time authentication breaks at 2 a.m., the magic wears off. The appeal is obvious: dump any data from any system and worry about the structure later. But that flexibility comes with a few headaches you just don't see in traditional SQL. If your organization is like most, different teams are dropping in files from analytics, finance, and even third-party partners. Now you've got CSVs, Parquet, Avro, JSON, half a dozen formats, all shaped differently, each managed by someone with their own opinion about standards. Suddenly, you're not managing one data lake, you're babysitting a swamp, and the only thing growing faster than the storage bill is the number of support tickets. The biggest pain point hits when things change and nobody tells you. Let's say your pipeline worked yesterday, pulling weekly payroll files from a secure folder. Overnight, HR's system started exporting data as JSON instead of the usual CSV. Maybe IT rotated a secret, or someone changed directory permissions as part of an audit. The next morning, your downstream reports are full of blanks. Finance can't reconcile, business leads start asking where their data went, and you get a call to just fix it, even if nobody gave you a heads up that the file structure or security paths changed. The pipeline itself is often silent about what broke. All you get is an error message about an unsupported file or access denied. These surprises aren't rare. They're almost expected in environments where multiple teams and workflows all want to play in the same lake. Azure Data Lake authentication is its own moving target compared to SQL. With SQL, you're mostly dealing with user credentials or managed identities. In Data Lake, you've got a menu of options: service principals, application identities set up in Azure AD, OAuth tokens for user-based access, and storage account role assignments. Each method has fans and detractors. Service principals are favored for server-to-server pipelines because you can scope them exactly and rotate secrets safely. OAuth tokens give users a little more convenience but expire quickly, so they're not reliable for unattended jobs. Storage roles like storage blob data contributor control access at a coarse level and can cause accidental exposure if not managed. People sometimes just grant owner to save time, which almost always ends with an audit finding or a panic when things go wrong. The result: you have to audit not just what roles exist, but who or what holds them and how quickly those assignments update when folks leave the team or you tie into new apps. Now, let's talk about what happens after you've managed to unlock the door. Feeding raw data straight into your lakehouse seems easy until the structure changes one night and downstream jobs start failing. Dataflows Gen2 steps in as a buffer here. Instead of passing weird, unpredictable files into your store and hoping for the best, Gen2 lets you preview the latest drops, map columns, convert data types, merge mismatched headers, and even catch corrupted or missing records before they hit your analytics stack. Let's say you suddenly get a batch where the employee ID field disappears or appears twice. With Gen2, you can set validation steps that either flag, correct, or quarantine the problem rows. That way, instead of waking up to a lakehouse full of wrong data, you're dealing with a small flagged sample, and you know exactly where the drift happened. The punchline: schema drift is almost always underestimated in cloud data lakes. According to a study from the Databricks engineering team, nearly 70% of major ingest incidents in large enterprises involved a mismatch between expected and actual file structure. Those incidents led to not just broken dashboards, but actual missed business opportunities, like a missed market signal hiding in dropped data or cost overruns from reprocessing jobs. If you rely only on direct pipeline copies, every small upstream change is a hidden landmine. Pipelines move data at speed, but they generally don't stop to check if a new field has arrived or if a once mandatory value is now blank. Unless you're running external validation scripts, silent errors creep in. Previewing and cleansing data with Dataflows Gen2 has very real impact. I once saw a marketing analytics team set up daily landing page report ingestion. Someone switched the column order in the export, harmless, except it mapped bounce rate values into the visit duration field. For 3 days, campaign performance looked wild until someone finally checked the raw data. When they switched to Dataflows Gen 2, the mapping issue flagged instantly. No more detective work, just a direct path to the fix. Configure your Azure Data Lake connection with scoped service principles. Review your storage account role assignments regularly, and always put Dataflows Gen 2 logic between ingestion and storage. That's how you avoid turning your lake into a swamp and keep business reporting honest. And just when you think you've mastered files and schemas, Dynamics 365 Finance knocks on the door, ready to introduce APIs, throttling headaches, and new wrinkles you can't just flatten out with a data flow. Solving the Dynamics 365 Finance puzzle and future-proofing your architecture. If you've ever tried to ingest finance and operations data from Dynamics 365, you know this isn't just another database import. Dynamics is a whole ecosystem. There's the core ledger, sure, but around every corner are APIs that change often, tables with custom fields, and a history of schema updates that can break things when you least expect it. Companies love to extend Dynamics, but all those little modifications mean pipelines break in new ways each quarter. More than once, a business user has asked why their numbers look off, only to find out a new custom field in Dynamics never made it over due to a mismatched pipeline. The gap isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's a blank on a report, other times it's a full-on outage during a close. The pipeline quietly failed and no one noticed until the finance team started their morning checks. And that's just the beginning. Dynamics 365 finance data lands behind layers of authentication most other SaaS tools don't bother with. You'll be dealing with Azure Active Directory app registrations, permissions set through Azure roles, and sometimes even conditional access policies that block requests from the wrong IP, even your own test machines. Managed identities work, but only after you get both the Dynamics API and Azure AD admin teams speaking the same language. Then there's rate limiting. Dynamics APIs are notoriously aggressive about throttling calls if you spike usage too fast. If your pipeline tries to pull thousands of records a minute, you may wind up with 429 errors that don't self-heal. The result is a log full of retries and an ingestion window that drifts past your SLA. And incremental loading? Not so straightforward. Unlike SQL, where you can usually track changes with a timestamp or an ID, Dynamics often spreads updates across multiple tables and logs, sometimes with soft deletes or late arriving edits. You have to stitch together each change, pick up new and updated records, and avoid duplicating transactions, a process that's hard to automate unless you build that logic into your pipeline orchestration from the start. Let's talk about what can go wrong when things shift. Picture this. A finance analyst is waiting on their daily AP report, but suddenly totals aren't matching up. It turns out a new payment reference custom field was added in Dynamics after a regulatory update. The creation of that field changed the structure of one export endpoint, and the ingest pipeline wasn't prepared. Dataflows Gen 2, if you use it, can rescue you here. It's built for exactly this situation. As the new field shows up in the incoming data, Dataflows Gen 2's mapping interface flags the change. You get a preview, a warning, and then a way to either map, transform, or skip the field until you update your data model. Without that buffer, the pipeline just skipped the whole row. With Dataflows, a quick mapping keeps the flow unbroken and the finance team happy. Another win, Dataflows Gen 2 isn't just a stopgap for structure changes. It gives you tools to reshape and clean Dynamics data every time you ingest, creating rules that automatically resolve data type mismatches or reformat financial values and dates. You can save these mappings and apply them elsewhere, which means you're not rewriting logic every time a new entity or export hits production. And if you're planning on rolling in additional modules or connecting Salesforce later, you'll be glad you took the time to organize your transformations up front. The reuse saves a mountain of rework down the road. Orchestration is critical for these kinds of business-critical pipelines. You can't just run and hope for the best. With pipelines in Fabric, you can build in robust error handling. If a batch fails on API throttling, set it to retry automatically and send an alert only if retries are exhausted. That way you catch and deal with temporary issues before they snowball. For even more resilience, integrate notification steps that ping the right owner or kick off a team's message the moment something fails, so no one is caught off guard. Before you put anything in production, validation is non-negotiable. Research suggests that organizations who run end-to-end tests on sample dynamics loads catch over 80% of mismatched field issues and missed records before go live. Set up sample runs, scrutinize both the raw rows and the final dashboards, and regularly schedule pipeline health checks so nothing slips through as updates roll out to Dynamics. This modular approach means you're not locking yourself into one vendor or source. If your organization adds Salesforce, Workday, or any custom CRM into the mix, you can build new ingest modules that reuse authentication, transformation, and orchestration patterns. You're not just patching for today's needs, you're getting a foundation that can pivot as requirements shift. With the right pieces in place up front, you're ready for expansion, integration, and most importantly, fewer "why is my data broken?" tickets from your stakeholders. So it's not about brute forcing another connector or surviving every field change. The trick is to build a pipeline framework that expects change and manages it on your terms. When you pair Dataflows Gen2's data shaping and previewing with strong pipeline orchestration, you not only meet today's Dynamics 365 finance challenges, you clear the path for whatever's next in your enterprise. Now, let's wrap with the insight that actually saves your team from those panicked escalations down the road. If you take away one lesson from working with Microsoft Fabric Ingestion, it's that your design isn't just a technical choice, it's how much confidence your business has in its own data. Simply swapping connectors or copying patterns won't save you from broken reports, delayed projects, or late-night Slack messages. Build for flexibility and control up front. Future, you will thank you when a schema changes or a new system plugs in. If you've tried any of these approaches or run into different snags, let us know in the comments. Hit subscribe for more on building smarter data strategies that actually hold up.